Welcome to the Christian Principles Podcast. I'm Matt George.
I'm Mark Zockel.
Here we are again.
We've been here, but we're coming back now.
Yeah.
Today we're going to talk to you about out-of-country trips. Now, maybe this is something that your school's never even thought about. Maybe this is something your school would never think about. Maybe this is something that your school wants nothing to do with. We're going to talk about taking our students and leaving the country with them. Now, we had the podcast just a little bit ago, right? The Golden Podcast, the 50th.
Yeah, the Golden Pod.
We said, what would we do? And we said one of the things we would do is have a weekly trip wherever in the world we wanted with as much money as we wanted. And this is like that. This is a big deal. So before we keep going, let's hear from that brand partner, and then we'll come back. All right, so we're coming back in, and we're talking to a guest who we've had before, Dr. Lesli Nichols. Thank you so much for joining us again, Dr. Nichols, Principal Nichols. I'm sure you get called 100 different things in your day, depending on how long the students have known you and the rest of it. But thank you for coming back in.
Mrs. Pickles is my favorite. So
Mrs.
our
Nichols?
preschool, Mrs. Pickles is what the
Mrs.
preschoolers. Yeah, that's what I get
awesome.
from preschoolers. Yeah,
that is good. Now, in your new situation, is your pre-K on the same campus as where you are, or not?
Yeah, yep. They're still a branch of the school. They're not accredited, but they are considered the school.
But they're physically with you.
Yes, they're right across the hall from my office, so I get a lot of interesting feedback throughout the day. So
a lot of Miss Pickles, talk.
Yep.
All right. Okay, so we're going to. The reason we've asked Miss Pickles to come back on with us is because Lansdale Baptist Academy, Lansdale Baptist School,
Calvary Baptist School.
Oh, what am I doing in Lansdale?
You weren't even close, but that's okay.
Leave it to Mark.
CBS. The reason CBS is back on with us, and Dr. Nichols, is because let's just start that over. Matthew, we're going to start that over.
Make Martin look intelligent.
Yeah, this is horrible. The reason we're having Lesli back on with us is because she has been the planner, the executor, and the chaperone, those are not necessarily, you don't have to be the one to be them all, or one doesn't do them all. She's been that for CBS for some time now, concerning and trips to Africa, right?
No, to Nicaragua.
Trips to Nicaragua is where you've been going. There you go. So when we heard this about her, we said we've got to have her on and talk about those trips specifically, because that's the ultimate field trip, and that could be, though, of course, the ultimate mission-minded field trip, the thing which takes our students and catapults them on. So that's what we're going to talk about today. All right, Lesli. So let's ask the first one: how close is an international trip with students to just an international trip with your family? It's close, not so much.
There's similarities in that you have to make sure you have all your paperwork in order. You have, your plane tickets, visas if necessary, immunizations if those are necessary, passports, all of that. But it is very different when you're traveling with other people's kids and not your own. There's a whole different level, whole different layer of responsibility that you are taking on when it's not your own family, not your own kids. So similar as far as the planning goes, execution, very different.
That makes me want to stop right there. I don't even want to take my kids, let alone somebody else's kids. And crazy enough, at the school I'm in, they at one point sanctioned students to go by themselves to France. There were French 3 students, and they went by themselves, but it was very much, through, quote unquote, through the school. That scares me, especially maybe they're just more mature. I don't know if they were more mature. They were in my class.
I'm sure it's not, but I'll tell you what, international travel brings so much awareness to students. It really is a wonderful opportunity to get them out of not just the Christian school bubble, but the American culture bubble, and brings a whole different level of awareness of how things are around the world. And we don't do it in a vacuum. We don't, have kids sign up and the next thing, I'm jetting them off to, Central America. There is a year-long process prior to this trip to prepare them for it. So that's also a different area, something that's different. You wouldn't do necessarily a book study with your kids before going on a family vacation. They're not,
Oh,
you're
you
not.
guys don't? Oh, you guys don't? Okay.
I'm
That's
not
part
that
of my
spiritual.
that's part of my daily 5 a.m. wake up in my time, But that's just me and my family.
When you're traveling overseas with your kids, you're not necessarily doing service projects like you're doing on a missions trip too. So
I also feel like international travel, and maybe this is just, I don't know, just within my realm of influence, but it seems like it's far more common for foreign nations to be sending students to the United States. But when it comes to us talking to parents about sending our American kids over to the other countries, like, whoa, we can't do that. So there seems to be a little bit more kickback. But
yeah. I mean, my husband and I have been traveling with teenagers for over 30 years, doing senior trips, missions trips, in-state service projects, things like that. My husband, I would not do these trips without my husband. He knows instinctively his role on these trips as far as corralling kids while I'm dealing with paperwork and, all of that. But it's you've got to have the right people chaperoning as well to be able to pull these kind of trips off, and they've got to understand their role as well. But yeah, American kids are a lot harder to travel with than international students. We've been doing senior trips here at Calvary, and for a long time we had a huge international student program. Those were the easiest kids to travel with. They were used to dealing with passports. They were used to, how you behave in an airport. It was the American kids that were like, we were tearing our hair out trying to get them through security without saying something stupid,
Man.
Right.
Okay, Leslie, really fast, you touched on this a little bit, but we brought you on for a reason because you take these trips. Yep. What is the annual trip that you take with your students? Just describe that for us quickly for our audience.
So it's actually, we do it every other year. And we started this just as COVID was hitting. We actually got almost stranded in Nicaragua when the world shut down, but we managed, the Lord opened up all the doors and we miraculously got home. But what the impetus of this was, we have one of our alumni, Stuart Lee, who graduated in 2009, married a Nicaraguan and started a Christian school up in a little mountain village in northern Nicaragua in an area called Jinotega. And he had been an international business major at Cedarville, and the Lord put it on him to start this school. And he was in contact with me wanting to model his school after Calvary because he had been a student here from preschool through 12th grade. It was all he had known. And so he was begging me to come down there and help him as he was launching this school. And so he began the school in 2018 with just preschool and kindergarten. And by the time we got there in 2020, he was up to second grade. He just kept adding a grade as the kids got older. He is now about to launch, their school year is a little bit different than ours, but beginning in the middle of January, his school will now be preschool through 7th grade. So now he's getting up into a secondary school. So this will be our third trip this March. So we go every other year to go down there and work in the school and help support him.
Which is the only reason you won't be at the Max Administrators Conference that we'll be hosting on March 24th. So you are lucky to be out of the country. Otherwise you would be there.
I have no other excuse other than I will be out of the country, and hopefully the world will not shut down on us.
Yeah. So really what you're saying with this, his school is, it's been smooth sailing, but now the 7th grade, different environment.
Yes. Now, those kids going into 7th grade have been in his school since kindergarten. So, they know, and it's been a learning process for him too, because he wanted to model this school after Calvary, an American Christian private school. But you have Nicaraguan teachers who have no frame of reference as to what that even looks like. I mean, their public schools that they had grown up in, it was literal squalor. We've gone into the public schools in the village while we've been there, and broken chalkboards and broken windows and ceiling tiles falling down and no supplies whatsoever. That's what those teachers know of education. So being in Stewart's school, it's like elite for them to be part of that.
Yeah. Yeah, I think we get a little glimpse of that, especially post-COVID, because the families that have always been in the public education system, and they come over here. There's some expectations of like, well, isn't this something that every school does? No, and then like, oh wow, you guys do something better.
Mhm.
It's like, whoa, okay, but so just as we get into the specifics of that trip, I'm assuming it's not just wide open. Anybody can go.
Right.
You've even referenced this already. And actually, I was thinking about a conversation we had um, on the podcast a long time ago with our good friend from Ireland, Josh Moore. James, I'm turning into Mark. I'm spelling.
Lansdale Christian
Oh
something or
man,
other.
Josh, yeah, my real good friend. I
James
can't even say
Mahomes,
his
yeah.
first name. But he
We
was
have
talking
no
about
idea what we're doing.
taking mission trips in high school, and that it was a make it or break it because preparation and everything else. So who do you limit? What ages are going on these trips?
Sure. Yeah. So we have an application process. So at the end of the school year prior, so this would have been back in April. Actually, no, I think it was back in last January. I handed out the applications to the students and I said, I am limiting this trip to 10 students. Probably 35 kids took the application. I gave them a month to hand it in. And the application goes through, their testimony of salvation. I'm not taking a kid on a mission trip that doesn't have a clear testimony of salvation. What they are currently doing in their local church to be involved, as far as being active church members, or involved in their church if their church doesn't necessarily have a membership process. They have to have letters of recommendation from 3 adults they are not related to, one of which has to be a pastor of their church, attesting to their involvement.
This sounds harder than Matt's interview.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then I have a couple other chaperones review those with me. Now, this year, our chaperones, it's obviously me and my husband, but then it's 4 teachers in the school who have asked to go, 2 of whom have gone on the trip. They went on the last one, and then 2 new teachers that are going. So I have them review as well because they know, how these kids interact with their classmates and their peers. And we narrowed, of the 15 applications that we actually received, of the 35 that were handed out, we narrowed it down to 11 students who made the cut. And they have to commit to raising the funds. We don't really do any in-house fundraisers. They have to pay the $2,000. So the picks are announced at the beginning of May. And then they have to turn in the first 1,000 by the end of September and the second 1,000 by the end of February to cover costs of the trip. We do a fundraiser, a coffee fundraiser, where they get orders for coffee from Nicaragua, because Jinotega is a coffee producing region. We when we go on the trip, we just bring all that coffee back. So we'll come back with like 250 bags of coffee that the kids have sold as part of the fundraising. But other than that, they do their own service projects. They send out their own support letters. I don't oversee any of that. It goes directly into the finance office that keeps tabs for each kid. So they have their own account that they're paying into. So that's how that works.
That's the nitty gritty. We need to keep talking about that kind of nitty gritty. That's what we're looking for. So, So specifically, in that nitty-gritty mindset, how do you go about trying to save money? Like, I'm sure 2,000 goes a long way, long enough, I'm sure, but I'm sure you're always looking for ways to save money. So how do you go about saving money for international travel with a bunch of students?
Yeah, so I mean, it really is something that they're committing to well in advance so that they have time, and I give them ideas. I save money myself. The school covers my costs, but not my husband. So, we have to plan that into our budget as well. for his travel expenses and all of that. But it's really up to the families. The families make the commitment to send the student on the trip. So all the communication goes to the parents as well as to the kids with the updates. The parents commit to making sure their kids are at our monthly meetings. So I didn't mention this before, but we do a book study on short-term missions, and we meet monthly at my house on a Sunday afternoon for 2 hours, and we go through the book. They have homework that I give them, whether it's answering the questions or doing research on the country. Part of the kids, their main responsibility when we go over there is they're teaching classes. So the adults are overseeing a teaching team on a certain subject, but the kids are doing all the work. So they have to amass, all the materials that they're bringing with them, supply lists, so I can place those orders ahead of time. So there's a lot of work behind the scenes that's, going on for 9 months prior to even leaving. And the kids and the parents are committing to that. So we've done this trip enough where there's a real confidence in the parents that this is worth it, that this is a valuable trip, and that their kids, did make the cut. It wasn't like we used to just take everybody that applied. We made that mistake, and had some kids that we just should never have brought on the trip, but did because they, filled out the application and paid the money. But we're a lot more selective now, and those parents understand this is a privilege. It is not a right.
Talk to me about a student that got denied. I mean, maybe you don't want to do this year's or whatnot, but like just in general, is that something that presents the school an issue?
Not so much the school as much as me personally, but
Okay.
we can take it. I had a couple of parents very upset with me because their kids didn't make it. But, first of all, the biggest thing was they asked for the application the day before it was due. And that to me was the biggest red flag, because they had a month. I handed them out in a chapel in January. They were due, the end of February. They had more than a month to get it in. They asked for the application the day before, which now puts the pressure on those 3 people that they have to get recommendation letters from. And I'm sitting there going, no, because you're going to wait to the last minute. You're going to procrastinate on your responsibilities. You're going to hold up your teaching team. So that was the biggest number one reason why I cut people. One of the others was the letters of recommendation did not give a glowing recommendation, especially from pastors. We had one kid who got one of the pastors here at Calvary to write a recommendation letter. The kid doesn't go to our church. So it's like, no, I'm not taking this as a recommendation letter. You've never stepped foot in the church on a Sunday, and you're asking this pastor to write a recommendation. So those were the major reasons.
You may have said this and I missed it, but are we dealing with juniors and seniors, or does it go less than that?
It's open 9th through 12th.
9th through 12th.
So,
okay.
Yeah. So this year we only have 10th through 12th that applied. Our 9th graders tend to be a bit more immature this year, so I probably wouldn't have taken any of them anyways, maybe 1 or 2. But I try to bring at least 2 who have been on the trip before to act as team leaders, because they know what to expect. They can speak into stuff that their peers are prepping because they've had the experience before. That's tremendously helpful.
Yeah. Now, does the school give credit for the kids that go on this, or is it just voluntary?
No, it's just voluntary. Yeah, and it is something that they can use on college applications, and I have had students who have used it on college applications as, something that it really makes them stand out, that they were willing to go to, a third world communist country and teach in a Christian school. I mean, that's something that catches notice. But we don't give any kind of credit or any kind of service hours or anything. It's strictly a voluntary trip.
So this is apart from any kind of senior trip. This has nothing to do with the senior trip status. This is completely something that Dr. Nichols, Mrs. Pickles, and her husband do.
Yep.
And that makes me want to go back to the first one. The first one you did, how many did you take with you?
On that trip, we had 10.
Okay.
And it's funny because 2 of those kids that were on that very first trip went to Cedarville. They're students at Cedarville. They're actually seniors this year. And Cedarville has now started doing this trip every year as well.
Oh, wow.
Because Stuart, the missionary, is a Cedarville grad.
Yeah.
And those 2 kids went on this missions trip with Cedarville.
That's
And
cool.
yeah, so you had
They said
asked,
yours was better, right?
yeah. Oh, they said they definitely enjoyed their first round more just because it was such a novelty. But they were able to step up in leadership with the Cedarville team because that was their first time going. And here you have these 2 kids who are able to say, "Oh yeah, we know exactly what to expect. This is how we can best benefit the school while we're there." So to me, when you had asked, is there any kind of long-term effect that you've seen in kids' lives? Yeah, I would say those 2 students were able to take a leadership role with their college team to be able to go back and minister. And one of those girls, she's really interested in going back for maybe a longer term
Wow.
teaching opportunity there. I know she has been talking to Stuart about, the possibility of maybe coming down on something more long term after she graduates. Although she's got a boyfriend now, so that could change things. But
Man,
those boyfriends.
Lesli, on something very, again, logistic like the passport, I'm sure you have built in now, having done this so many times, okay, I need a passport as part of your application. Like, do you have a passport in hand,
Yeah.
or I'll have it with so as our admin are listening to this, did you create those deadlines yourself?
Yeah.
Did you go somewhere to get those deadlines?
Yeah, no, I created those myself just because we've done international travel. My husband and I have done, multiple missions trips, have traveled internationally ourselves. So we understand the time it takes. The last trip we went on, we had, I was on the kids like, you have to apply for that passport before November 1st. And especially coming out of COVID, you had like it got so backed up that passports were taking a really long time to get because all of a sudden international travel became a thing again and everybody was applying for passports. And I had one student who kind of dragged his feet, and it wasn't until like the end of December he submitted his application for his passport, and it got denied mid-February because the picture wasn't clear. And so we were like, we don't know if this kid is going to get his passport in time. At that point, the trip was like beginning of March. His passport came like 3 days before we left.
Wow.
So, I mean, that was like a total answer to prayer. But yeah, so now I'm like a firm November 1st, get that passport deadline, get that application. So this year's team, everybody has their passport already applied for. I think 2 kids are still waiting to get theirs. But yeah, that one kind of put me in a bit of a panic because everything had been paid for at that point.
Now, let's say Matt's on your team and Matt's done his job with his passport, but he hasn't done his job raising money. And so it comes, you said March 1st, you're leaving. It comes 2 days before, he hasn't raised $500. He doesn't go, first of all, right? And then what happens to his money?
Well, we would bill his tuition. Like because we're doing
so it is very much tied to the school in that way.
Yeah, well, yes, in that way, because all the money runs through our school finance office. I don't touch the money until I grab the cash before we're heading down there. So that first 1,000 that they pay in September is really covering the travel costs.
Yeah, absolutely.
So it's paying plane, baggage fees, all of that. The second 1,000 is paying more for our in-country costs. And I have to bring all of that because in Nicaragua, credit cards get compromised all the time. So we pay for everything in cash. So I am traveling.
Whoa.
Maybe I shouldn't announce this.
Don't say this out loud.
We'll cut this off.
Thousands of dollars strapped to me at all times. Because once we land, I hand that money over to the missionary, and he's using that to pay for in-country travel, hotel, food. Anything that's left over goes to gifts to the teaching staff. I mean, those teachers make $75 a week. That is what they get paid, and they are paid well in that village. The average person is making about $10 a day in that village. So his teachers are actually very well taken care of. And so we try to do service projects while we're there. When we were there 2 years ago, we paid for and helped pour a cement floor for one of the teachers who had just built a house that was probably 12 by 12 feet. It was he and his wife and his 2-year-old. And they had built a cinder block house with a tin roof, but they couldn't afford a floor. So they had a dirt floor. So we had extra money. So I said to Stuart, what's it going to cost to get this guy a concrete floor? And he said, it'll be about $300 for the materials and the labor. And so we went up there the day they were pouring the floor, and they were literally mixing the cement in the middle of the dirt road. And so our students helped, mix cement and haul it in with 5-gallon buckets.
That's
and
awesome.
Help pour the last portion of the floor. Another one of the teachers needed their house painted. So my husband went with a crew of the boys and they painted. He said it was the worst quality paint he's ever worked with. And my husband's a perfectionist. He just redid our entire house. So it was killing him to have to use his paint, but they got that house painted. So we've bought supplies for, the school. So anything extra goes to help the teachers in that school.
Are you willing to share your pre-packaged, this is how you take kids out of the country with an administrator that might contact you about this?
Yeah, sure. I mean, for me, it's number one, bring the right kids. Take the right kids who have a heart to serve. They may not have had much experience with it, but they're willing to learn. I've taken kids on this trip before that it's about what they want to get out of the trip rather than what they are giving. And they've been miserable to deal with. And I regretted taking them. So you've got to have, first of all, the right kind of kids that have a mindset of service, have a heart of service, don't mind scrubbing toilets, washing floors, working in the classroom, working with kids who can't talk to them because they don't speak English. But, that's the number one thing. And number two, you have to be that mindset yourself. You can't ask the kids to do something that you're not willing to do yourself. So you have to go with a service mindset as well. And then don't go just for a 1-week experience. Go to build relationships that are going to be long-term. That's one of the things in the book study that we're doing is if you're only going for the experience for 1 week, you are doing more harm than good to both that ministry and yourself. We've been building, and I tell our kids this, you are a blip in a long timeline of a relationship between our two schools. So make it a positive blip. And so we're looking for this to eventually bring, when he has a senior or has senior class, take 2 of his top 2 students and bring them over to our school for a senior year where they will get an American diploma, which will be incredibly valuable for them to go back to their country with.
That's
so
incredible.
That's the goal. That's the long-term goal. So this started, remember, his school started with kindergarten and preschool. So this was a 13-year plan. And we're about halfway through that 13-year plan of this long-term relationship. My husband and I both personally financially support both Stuart and the school every month. I encourage the kids, like, hey, if you have a job, do take him on as missionary support. And a couple of the kids have. We have one girl who came as a chaperone the last time. She's chaperoning again this time. She actually has done multiple trips on her own with that school where she went over for 3 months and helped teach and work. So yeah, I mean, it's definitely a long-term relationship that we've built. You can't build relationships with 5 different ministries, but you can pick one as a school, and that school, that ministry is your project, your school's project.
Wow. I'm looking up flights right now. So here we go.
Yeah,
going through the
it's
wall.
fun. It's a great opportunity. I'm telling you, we have the best time. And I tell the kids, don't go for what fun you're going to have, but you will have fun. And we always do some kind of adventure activity on the last day. We've, tubed down canyons that are lined with jade. We've hiked up to active volcanoes. We're doing a Pacific Coast experience on this one. You know, a lot of the kids have never seen the Pacific Ocean, so we're going to do that as our adventure day. So they will have fun, but that's not the goal.
Man, I'm sorry to have to shut this down, Dr. Pickles, but
it's so
we
great.
just once again we just need to do another one of these with you and talk more
Absolutely.
about, like, we hit nitty gritty,
Anytime.
we hit big picture, we hit the relation. I
Yeah.
love how you get to the relationship later and centered our mind on the possibility of we go out and find our own Christian school. So we're doing, and now I just want to go to Nicaragua with you. So
Hey, well,
sign
you
me up.
have your thing, you know, you have your thing
I
while
can't.
I'm there, but
Yeah, we got our mission.
2027 will be the next trip. If you want to hop on and do it as a survey trip for your own school, absolutely.
Or you're
More
going
than
to go in
welcome to come.
2026 with, or you're going to go in 2026 with our students. And you're going to do an every other thing,
Oh,
and
Well,
then
there you
we'll
go. You
send
can
you. So,
alternate with us. Yep, there you go.
Dr. Pickles, thanks for joining us. I
Sure.
really appreciate it. You have a great rest of your day.
Thank you. Merry Christmas, guys.
Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas.
Yeah, it's coming. Break is coming.
Oh, you're the best. Thank you so much.
Yeah,
Leslie.
anytime. I always enjoy it.
All right. Matt, shall we talk about our fellow Christian administrator who is going to be spotlighted?
Let's do it. We've got, for our spotlight segment today, we are shouting out Mr. Matthew Gaines, a director at Southern Maryland Christian Academy.
All right, Mr. Gaines and I I was able to meet Mr. Gaines when I went to an ACSI administrator leadership meeting in, I think this was a couple of years ago now, at Annapolis Area Christian School. And I was able to talk to him a couple times over a Zoom session that was held with some of those leaders as well. And he is leading that school, the school that began early. They are celebrating a large anniversary coming up here soon. So on the other side of us, one of those schools that if we built a bridge between like Cambridge and where their school is, it would take what is a 4-hour trip and make it something like an hour and a half or 2 hours, which they say the span is coming. I don't think it's going to be a span that's quite that large because that's a long way. But you know, it would be nice to see. It'd be nice to get another span from east to west, from the Eastern Shore over the Western Shore coming up at some point. Yeah. But thank you, Mr. Gaines, for your work there at SMCA.
SMCA. Thank you. And thank you guys for listening to this podcast. It was great talking with Dr. Nichols again. And hopefully, like me, you're all thinking about, you know, we talk about ministry. We talk about teaching our kids to look for opportunities for ministry, find it and do it. And we're thankful for Calvary Baptist taking the lead on that and sharing that with us. And hopefully it was an encouragement and possibly gave you some ideas.
Yeah, maybe you're going to do it too. All right. Thanks for going with us today.
Sweet.